One of the gifts for me of doing this has been bringing in speakers who are great people and people that I've gotten to know. And Tina Perricone, who's hiding here in the corner in the front, over here, is an ordained interfaith minister. And she's got a degree in psychology, and she's a resident chaplain, has been a resident chaplain at UCSF, and for the past 10 years working as a chaplain. Oh, was it Sutter?
No.
No, not always.
Last 5 years.
But, okay, for the last 5 years. Tina played a tremendously influential role in the last stages of care for my wife, Mary. I had no idea what a hospice chaplain was. I kind of thought they were Catholic priests that came and gave last rites, and I hadn't given it any thought. And what I found was something tremendously valuable to me, to my son Matt, to my sister-in-law. A way of being listened to that is a rare thing on this planet. And Tina is a rare gift. And I'm thrilled that she is here to talk with you. I also want to say, bridging the gap between, so I was in an interfaith marriage. I'm Jewish and my wife is Quaker. And I didn't know how any of that stuff was going to work around how do you manage the religion part of this and spiritual side of this, and Tina navigates this world in such an amazing, deep, and graceful way. And it's all you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I really do want to thank Peter for trusting me with you and your hearts and your time. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I've been asked a few times if I have a PowerPoint. And the truth is, as a chaplain, I just don't have one. When I'm with people, I feel like I'm in the foxholes. And I am meeting each person, no matter what disease they may have or not have, just in the moment with who they are and what's happening right now. And my motto comes from a spiritual teacher that many of you may know named Ram Dass. And his great motto was, we're all walking each other home. And that's what guides me. So I may be up here as a chaplain speaking, and if I meet any of you on hospice, I'm a chaplain and we're walking each other home. So there's no PowerPoint. Originally, I was asked to speak about palliative care, hospice within palliative care, relative to Parkinson's. And the truth is, when I meet with people, once they've decided to choose hospice, it's mostly comfort care. So it's not any kind of treatment to keep your mobility going and high functioning. It's about how to keep people really comfortable. And one of the things I was thinking about, I'm going to address with a quote from Joseph Campbell. It's a little bit of a long quote, and I hope that you feel it's as applicable as I do. This is from a series that he did with Bill Moyer, and it's called The Power of Myth. He said, problem in middle life, when the body has reached its climax of power and begins to decline, is to identify yourself not with the body, which is falling away, but with the consciousness of which it is a vehicle. And this is something that I learned from myths. What am I? Am I the bulb that carries the light? Or am I the light of which the bulb is a vehicle? One of the psychological problems in growing old is the fear of death. People resist the door of death. But this body is a vehicle of consciousness. And if you can identify with the consciousness, then you can watch the body go like an old car. There goes the fender, there goes the tire, one thing after another, and it's predictable. And then gradually the whole thing drops off, and consciousness rejoins consciousness. Now, I realize not everybody may, have that same belief system, but I did want to share that because the idea of identity, who am I, is going to be the questions that guide your own goals of care. In palliative care, palliative means to mitigate. That's the etymology, to mitigate symptoms. There's early palliative care where you're still functioning, you're out there, you're doing your thing, and maybe the symptoms are just they've reached a critical mass, more pain, fatigue, and other things which are not in my wheelhouse. Then there's the hospice portion of palliative care. And that's when, if folks don't know, the eligibility for Parkinson's is different than other disease processes. But in hospice, there's a loose requirement that a person is deemed by their medical doctor to have 6 months or less to be alive if their disease goes untreated. We have people who've been on hospice for almost 3 years. So it is not any kind of a strict sentence, if you will. What palliative care, and then especially hospice care, offer is increased support, both for the individual, say with Parkinson's in this case, and for their beloved, their circle of care. So ideally, in a robust hospice, there are social workers who are engaged with helping with, identifying resources as best as possible. There are counselors who are meeting with folks along the way for family dynamics or bereavement, sorrow, support groups for caregivers, as well as our clients, folks such as myself, like the chaplain, who provide a very broad stroke of spiritual care. And spiritual care can be religious care if somebody has very specific religious needs that they'd like to have met. But the broad stroke is what's meaningful to you. You are a whole person, and that's who hospice is embracing. What is meaningful to you? And we listen. That's a very big part of hospice and palliative care. Bill mentioned the unknown. And again, I am in no way knowledgeable enough about Parkinson's to understand the spectrum of embodiment. And there is going to be an unknown for everyone. I have brought a poem that addresses the unknown, so thank you, Bill, for the segue. And this is called Trusting the Unfolding. Be still. There is no prize for arriving early at an answer that is still unfolding. The earth keeps its seasons, never rushing what is next. The moon never apologizes for disappearing, knowing that it is still whole behind the darkness. You are allowed to not know, to trust that the path appears one gentle step at a time. So much suffering comes from pulling tomorrow into today, and asking the heart to carry what only time can hold. Instead, listen to the breath arriving without effort, to the silence that asks nothing of you except your presence. And perhaps this moment is already enough. Life has never depended upon certainty, only openness. Let mystery be a companion instead of a burden. Rest in the quiet assurance that not everything needs to be figured out right now. Some answers are not found, they are lived. The line that I want to emphasize is life has never depended upon certainty, only openness. So in your individual journeys of being impacted and by Parkinson's, you will each find your own unique time when a critical mass happens. And palliative care, the early and then the late, will be a refuge for you. And I think the helpful thing is going to be asking yourselves in your breakout groups probably, what's meaningful to me? What is valuable to me in my life? Why am I doing everything that I can to hold on to the life that I have? Because at some point, like Joseph Campbell said, the fenders are falling off, the tires are falling off, there's holes in the gas tank. And it will be what each of us identifies with. Who are we? I'm a bird watching lover. I love watching sunsets. Like, what is your identity? So that's actually the biggest thing I hope to be bringing is your thoughts around your goals of care, which at what time palliative care will be helpful, will guide the questions you ask your doctors, your palliative care team, your hospice team, and the whole way I hope that you will advocate for yourselves to continue being seen and held as whole people, right? And I wanted to present myself as available for questions. One person did have a topic that I will bring up. Maybe not everybody wants to talk about it or hear about it, and I can make myself available at a different time. But the End of Life Option Act, the aid in dying, that is something that some people think about. And in the realm of my hospice experience, people have often considered it too late. And so if you ever feel that that is a part of the journey you're making, I would think about it sooner. And that's subjective. So I'm just going to leave that there. I want to invite folks to utilize me. I don't know how often you have a hospice chaplain in your midst, willing to answer as many questions as I can, but I hope people may have questions and that I can answer them.
Thanks, Tina. There's a lot of food for thought there and a lot of introspection called for, I think, to address those questions. Does anybody have any questions for Tina?
And don't be shy, because if, number one, there's no dumb question, and any question you might have, there's probably a few more people that have a similar question.
We're fighting over who's going to ask first. First of all, I want to say the approach that you're talking about is so valuable to hear, and that the questions about who am I are the questions that when I look at my own situation with my husband who has Parkinson's, how important that is to look at lots earlier than when palliative care is needed.
Yes.
Especially when we've worked in this culture that we have where we are with what we've done. And that in the later stages of life, whether that's having Parkinson's early or late, that's a real challenge, and there's a lot of suffering because we hang on to that as who we are, and how hard it is to let go of that and to make that shift for some people.
That's exactly so. I mean, I'm glad that you're able to affirm that. I'm not just making it up.
The question that I have is how, when people choose to make themselves available or have the end-of-life drugs made available to them, how often do people actually use them? I've heard that many people ask for them so that they'll have them and it gives them some peace of mind, but they don't always necessarily use them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, and the only reason I can is that I watched a film that I invite everyone to view. I think it's on Netflix for free. It may even be on YouTube. It's called How to Die in Oregon. It was made, it's a documentary. It was made more than 20 years ago. And Oregon was the very first state that had this legal option. So they collected a great deal of statistics. The statistic that you're addressing is only 27% of the people who had the cocktail in their home actually used it. And so in hospice, you know, everybody's different. I'm a very big proponent of people dying with dignity and with peace and with no pain. And so I am supportive of any, you know, the folks who choose to do that. And it does provide a great peace of mind, and I think that might be actually the most important piece.
Just in terms of logistics, is hospice care done through the medical provider, or is it an outside organization, or what is it exactly?
So it's a really good question. There are, say, hospices are independent, but they can be connected. So I work as a Sutter Hospice Chaplain. There's a Sutter Hospital, and there's the Sutter Health Network. A person can be a Sutter patient and choose any one of the hospices that are out there. They can just choose to go to Providence. They can choose to go to Anchor Hospice. They can choose to go to any of the other hospices that exist. You don't, to the best of my knowledge, a person doesn't even need their doctor's referral. We often get people who self-refer, or their family calls us up directly and says, we think our person is ready for hospice. And there are requirements, and so someone will come, a nurse will come out and do an assessment and talk with the medical director. And yes, a person is eligible or a person's not, because there are specific eligibility requirements. Yeah. So Kaiser up here has a palliative care department, but they do not have their own private hospice. So they will refer out to the many different hospices in the area. So hospice is covered by Medicare. Yeah, what that can mean is when a person decides to sign up for hospice services, their Medicare is then applied to hospice, and you can't double dip. Like, you can't do curative care through your insurance and hospice. You do choose.
So you said there are certain requirements, and a minute ago you mentioned that they are different for people with Parkinson's. Is that correct?
So, like, say someone with cancer, there are different eligibility criteria. Yes. I don't know exactly what they are, but a hospice would know. And a palliative care doctor would know, and maybe even, I mean, it's not difficult for a doctor to look up. They should have easy access to finding that information.
Can you talk about the difference between palliative care and hospice?
So palliative care is in a big umbrella. The palliative is how to mitigate symptoms. Hospice is a region underneath the palliative care umbrella, which is for end of life, where symptoms where an individual is, I would say, the metaphor I use is a tide. The tides cannot be stopped. I mean, maybe people can put up levees and things like that, but we cannot actually stop a tide. So when it's been identified that the tide is pulling someone out of, of this realm with this, the depth or severity of their symptoms, then that's when someone would probably choose hospice. I would say that in my experience, people wait too long. Now, that's my subjective observation. There's a lot of support in hospice, but oftentimes people choose to avoid hospice because they don't want to give in or give up. But we also find that sometimes when people elect to have hospice support, they feel more comfortable, their body's suffering less, and their quality of life kind of increases, and they may actually live a little bit longer because their body's more comfortable.
My understanding is that with hospice, if I were to sign on with hospice, will they still give me my drugs that I'm taking for Parkinson's? Or will that be considered my other care, so that would stop?
That's a really, really good question. As a chaplain, I don't know the ins and outs of that. What I can tell you is that I recall, yes, people still taking the medications for Parkinson's. So, but I really invite you to call and ask, really. I mean, there's nothing hidden. They let you know. You can call hospice and say,
I know that with my mother,
yeah.
we had to end up taking her to the hospital after we had signed up for hospice, so they stopped hospice.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't, there doesn't seem to be, they want you to kind of basically see that it is the end of life.
Yeah, that is where, as we're talking, so each person is different, right? Their symptoms are going to be different. Their quality of life, some people are, I will say that I think there is still probably a gap in what great care would be in our healthcare system. And it does seem as that not just with Parkinson's, but with other things, there can be a choice that's made that's hard in both directions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Having been through this fairly recently, in terms of Parkinson's medications, the answer is yes, you keep taking the Parkinson's medications. You don't get new medications, and you may want to let go of some of them. So it's more of a letting go than it is. But if you need Cinemet to move, then you keep taking Cinemet.
Thanks, Peter. Yes.
Can you hear me? Right. I hear a reefer. So I didn't get your name. However, I feel like you helped me define what my role is right now. I just arrived in Vercelli, Italy, to be with a man who I lived with Parkinson's in California, who needed 24-hour care, and his family took him over to Italy for that particular, to have that care, because he couldn't afford it over here. And since he's been over here, I brought him over there 4 years ago. It's the second time I'm visiting, and I wasn't sure what I would find, except that a few months ago he said to me, now remember, this man has had Parkinson's for 40 years, And as a nuclear engineer, he's no longer able to add and subtract to do anything, okay? But he said to me, and you might get this, he said, I think I want to quit my job. And I said, wait until I come visit and then we can talk about it. Because I heard the message like, I might be ready to let go. And I arrived on Thursday and found him in a very different state than I left him. Changed physically, significant physical, can't swallow very well, just the shifting changes of body. Your reminder, which is what I kind of feel as though it's helping someone rebirth back to where we came birthing from. That's kind of where I am. I've been a nurse since 1970 and worked as a hospice nurse, many, many other areas. So that's just, the hospice part of it is very dear to my heart because that's what we're helping happen, is that transition and making it as beautiful as possible because it's just a passage like birth in my feeling. And certainly when someone close to us, it's like it doesn't feel like that always because there's loss, but I feel as though that's the place I'm in. And so I don't as much have a question as much as thank you so much. I feel as though I've just been given a muscle to acknowledge what I'm doing here. He has 24-hour caregivers, his family, very strong Italian men who can take care of it all. And I'm having to be very gentle about how I approach anything because my experience wants me to, it's like, no, I'm not here for his body. I'm not here for his body. Today we listened to one of his favorite operas, which he doesn't get to do. So I want to thank you, and acknowledge how valuable that perspective is as we all move through these stages and support others in this stage of life. When life is moving along and bodies say, I'm done, no matter what reason. So thank you. I'd love to know your name and get in contact and how one gets to be a chaplain because I've been a nurse for 50 years. Maybe this is a time to just do different work. I don't know.
I'm Tina Marie Perricone. It's a Sicilian last name. And I'm happy to leave my email, so if people want to connect with me later, they can. I'll share that with people, and maybe it'll be in the newsletter. However it is, they can get it to you. Thank you so much.
You mentioned that you mentioned that people often wait too long, and if they decided to take advantage of that, they would die. I wonder if you could mention some of the criteria, some considerations that you would keep in mind.
So in the waiting too long, actually, I meant in coming on hospice. And what I've noticed is that people really want to be as independent as possible. And why not, right? I mean, I do. I want to be as independent as I possibly can. And I've seen spouses, especially, burn themselves out trying to help their person be as independent as possible and really not having access or knowledge of resources that can exist. And the moment they decide, somewhat exasperated and tired, to sign up for hospice, a plateau opens where they have access to people who help them make decisions. Sometimes it's their beloved with Parkinson's leaves living at home and moves into a care facility, like a board and care, where then the beloved spouse who's been the caregiver can be a loving spouse while somebody else does the day-to-day caregiving. And so what I've seen is the caregiver getting their energy back to be a loving, supportive person, and being there to meet the spiritual and emotional needs that they weren't able to do as robustly when all of the daily care and needs were on their shoulders. So that's more what I mean about choosing, say, hospice specifically a little sooner.
My husband and I have had 2 experiences with hospice for my mother and brother, and I just want to say how wonderful it was. Don't think we could have done it without them. I really appreciate all the hospice does. My question is, how is hospice different, or do you work in conjunction with death doulas?
So, death doulas are, they're like a third party, like a therapist. Like if you went and paid a therapist to go talk with them about anything, they're a third party. So a death doula is a profession almost like a life coach, but it's a death coach. And they're all different, right? There are lots of therapists out there, which if you interviewed them, you'd say, oh no, that's not the person for me. And then, you would resonate with someone. And they're private pay. So with hospice, you get Medicare covering me, the social worker, the nurse, the medical director, the bereavement group, the counselors that are available. And for those, with a little bit more, financial availability, perhaps a death doula could be a helpful person. Yeah. Yeah. I want to say thank you I'm glad that you had good experiences with hospice. I do want to tell people, because I'm a big advocate for good customer service, there are service failures in hospice, and I would just not be shy. If you find yourself or a beloved on hospice, you do need to, continue advocating for yourself. There are wonderful experiences, and sometimes there's challenging experiences. So just know that. Yeah.
Hospice takes over all medical prescriptions. When my wife died, we had to go through hospice rather than her regular situation. Same with my brother.
Yeah.
It was all done, all the medicine that he needed and she needed were done through hospice. Not two streams.
So that's true. So again, that's not, because as a chaplain, it's not the ins and outs of my day that a nurse would be more able to really go into depth about that. Like Peter mentioned, if Cinemed is going to be something that you're using for movement, that's going to be continued on. We do have folks, and this is beyond, like anybody on hospice, there might be someone who is declined a lot, and they've been taking blood pressure medication for a really long time, and they're having a hard time swallowing. And so, at some point, they're just going to stop taking that. There's a lot of things, as Peter mentioned, they will just drop away because they won't be helpful to take daily anymore. As far as coverage goes, right, there may be things like medications that I'm not aware of that aren't related directly to a person's diagnosis that hospice won't pay for. But I would really, if a person starts hospice, ask those questions. Say, this medication really is part of my quality of life. And if somebody says, oh, we're not covering that, say, really? Because hospices want your business, and so there may be a little squeak room. So just keep asking. And don't tell them that I'm telling you these secrets.
And if you go back a little bit further than beginning hospice, in terms of, sometimes it's very difficult just to even begin the conversation with somebody saying, how do we prepare for death?
Yeah.
Is that then saying, oh, I think you're going to die tomorrow?
Right.
Or is it going to be introduced in a more gentle way that it could be accepted by the person? Or
Yeah. I mean, that's anyone, right? I mean, that's that's ending because it is inevitable. And as we get older, and Bill, as you and I were talking about before, as we get older, we tend to find more people in our lives passing away. So we're confronted with illness and death more often. There is something called a death cafe. This is something that came into the mainstream in the last, I think, decade or so. People started wanting to be more engaging around the conversation of death and dying so they wouldn't be afraid of it. And I don't know what those are, but I don't know where they are. I vaguely know there's one in Petaluma that happens, but more and more people of all ages are starting to engage in these death cafes. If you do a quick internet search, like death cafes, Sonoma County, or whatever town you live in, I'll bet you something is going to come up. Like an Aquas Cafe, like something that mainstream as people meet, and somebody facilitates this. And that can be very helpful. Yeah.
Can I say something about death cafes?
Please.
I'm aware there is one in Sebastopol, and they ask for a very small donation. They're available. I've also heard of the one in Petaluma.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that Peter asked me to be here. And again, I will give my email address to whomever's in charge here. And if people have any, follow-up questions that maybe you're too shy or maybe think about later as you're grocery shopping, don't hesitate to send me a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So, is it necessarily that when a person goes into hospice, they die in hospice, or may they come home for like the last week when it's becoming very obvious that that's approaching? Can they go home?
So in the UK, there probably are like hospice houses, correct? Like there's a specific building here. Hospice comes to your home. So it's a service as opposed to a place. Some people may be in their own homes. Some people may be living in skilled nursing facilities. Some people may be, their own home is their assisted living community that they live in. So to answer your question, there may be some people who might live in a facility who are able enough to, say, move back. There is a woman I'm thinking about actually right now who I met yesterday who doesn't have enough money to have caregivers in her home, so she's living in her daughter's home. Not ideal, but she has a caregiver who's with her. She is interested in using the aid in dying. She is fading out, so she may move back to her own home very briefly, have her, a few friends who couldn't be full-time 24/7 caregivers on an ongoing basis, but they can be with her for, the last couple days when she chooses to utilize this. So in that case, that's kind of a special circumstance. Hospice comes to where people are, so they will be passing away in where they live.
I don't think you've covered this, but my question is, who do you have that first conversation with about palliative care in the medical system?
When I was a resident chaplain at UCSF, I would go on the morning rounds, weekly. There'd be weekly rounds where the residents for the doctors would meet with all of the rest of our team, and I was part of the palliative care team. And we would often hear these doctor residents talking about patients who it really seemed like could use palliative care. Palliative care is considered symptom management for symptoms above and beyond a person's disease process. We would often hear from the doctor residents, Dr. So-and-so is not ready to throw the towel in. And the palliative nurse practitioner would practically go apoplectic, saying, it's not about throwing the towel in, it's just about helping symptom management with a little bit more support. So what I suggest to people, because I do not know your doctors, and I do not know what healthcare systems you're a part of, is learn the phrase, "I'd like a palliative care consult," and use it. I'd like a palliative care consult. Because once you get a palliative care consult, the palliative care people tend to be the ones who can be not necessarily more realistic, but they can have the harder conversations. They're not invested in the success of their patient not dying. They're invested in the people they're working with feeling comfortable and symptom and pain-free. So that's my answer.
Can you clarify, please, who is on the hospice team, the different roles?
Sure.
And what they play?
So every hospice has a medical director. There are, like our immediate team is a case manager nurse. So we've got, if Peter's my patient, he's got a case manager nurse. He has a specific social worker. He's a specific chaplain. He may have a home health aide who comes and provides personal care, bathing. And then the structure, so that's the immediate team. Those are the people that a person does on a regular basis. A nurse comes to visit weekly. A social worker maybe once a month or twice, depending upon people's needs. The chaplain is available. I started out with Peter and his family once a month, and then it moved right into once a week. So it really just depends upon needs and availability. And then, so that little unit is helped by the larger agency structure where we have nurse supervisors and nurse practitioner and the medical director. But by and large, it's just those 4 people. Your nurse, your social worker, your chaplain, and your home health aide. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Are there more people you want to know about in hospice?
Well, I would just thought that we could use some clarification for people.
Yeah, sure.
And the frequency that they would see them.
Sure.
And maybe they help to expedite the communication with the doctor a little bit quicker.
So, you mean like the doctor that might refer a person to hospice?
The doctor that kind of oversees, so if there are any medical changes or concerns, and I know sometimes they help with equipment,
Right.
getting medical devices that are going to help with that. And in my experience, they've helped to, having that team in place will help to expedite those services a little bit quicker.
Absolutely. So every week, we meet with our medical director, and at Sutter Hospice, we have a really fabulous medical director. And so we talk about all of our clients. Every other week, a person, Medicare wants us to talk about a specific person every 14 days. So every Thursday, we meet, we talk about folks, and the medical director is in the meeting. And, any kind of changes or care needs, they don't just come up then. If there's a need in the moment, then we'll call, I won't necessarily call, but the nurse will call the medical director. So there's ongoing live attention. And we do have a second, not medical director, but like a co-medical director and a nurse practitioner available and on-call physicians to make orders for medical equipment or medications as needed. Yeah. So it's live in action now. We have a very active medical director who really cares about symptom management, but we all want people to be comfortable. One of the things that I say when I meet with my families is, do not be shy about calling the main number. Call sooner than later, because then we have more time. If you've got any question or concern, call.
And I want to underscore one point that you said earlier, and that is, if there are failures within the organization. We had a case manager who was fine, but I didn't like him. And so we asked for somebody else, and it was a huge improvement. So
it happens. It could be personality. It could just be the way the nurse is a nurse. It could be the way the social worker is a social worker. It could be the way a chaplain is a chaplain. And, you know, the patients have rights, and the patient right is to ask for someone else, really. And I encourage it.
Well, we have reached our time.
Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much.